Well, hello everyone. My name is Stephanie Ayesino, the Director of Community Engagement, and today I am joined by Eddie Umara, um, the Social Worker Supervisor in our Modesto office. And today we're just going to be talking more about the role of a social worker, an agency social worker specifically. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between a county worker versus an agency social worker, so you kind of understand some of the misconceptions that are what we do and what we don't do. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to write it in the chat. I'll check that periodically, and I'll ask Eddie, and we'll answer those for you. So, Eddie, do you want to kind of give us a general overview of what a social worker does?
Well, where to start? So, a social worker in general is an advocate. Um, Specifically, if we wanted to look at an agency social worker, we're an advocate for the foster children that are placed with us, an advocate for the foster parents if there's anything that they think that they need or services that they might think that they need for the child. They'll come to us, and then we try to advocate for them to try our best to be able to help them.
Okay, perfect. Um, so we're more of an advocate for the kids in our homes. What kind of things do you think the county does differently?
So I know that the county social workers they more work with the bio parents as well, and we have very little, if any, interaction with the bio families. We might see them coming in for supervised visitation, but we don't really work with them very much. And I know that the county workers also go to court to testify or submit court documentation and things like that. And that's just not something that we do very often unless we were to get subpoenaed or something like that.
Okay. So the county workers kind of deal with all of the front end stuff, and we're just more support for the child in the home.
Yes.
All right, perfect. So, in what ways does a Parents by Choice social worker advocate for a child?
So there's a lot of ways that we can advocate for a child. Whether it's in the foster home, maybe there's something that they specifically need and they just don't know how to really communicate that, or maybe they might be too scared or too shy. One good example is maybe there's a specific meal that they want to eat and they just don't know how to ask. So they might come to us and say, "Hey, Edward, I want to have this meal prepared and I don't know how to ask my foster parent. Can you do that for me?" And then of course we'll definitely be like, "Yeah, we'll talk to the foster parents and see what we can work out." Um, Other ways that we might advocate is maybe in school. Maybe we see that they're struggling in classes. Maybe they might need an IEP, but we don't know. So we might try to work with the teachers, the foster parents, and see what are they noticing. And then we'll go to the county worker and say, okay, maybe this child needs to be assessed. What can we do from there? Um, and then advocating for the child to the county worker on their specific case plans. Maybe they're not ready to be reunified. Maybe they want to change their goal and they just don't know again how to advocate for themselves. So we have to be that advocate for them.
Okay, perfect. So, how involved is an agency social worker in the case plan with the county?
We are very involved. It's not just meeting with them at CFTs. We are constantly in communication via phone, email, text messages, even right now with this COVID situation. And I know a lot of the county workers are working from home. We're still keeping in constant communication, and just we work a lot of times very hand in hand with the county workers to better serve the kids that are placed with us.
Okay, perfect. So, when a new family comes in and they have a child placed in the home, is there paperwork for them to fill out? How much?
Yeah, usually in the very beginning, there's a lot of paperwork that gets sent with them. There's a whole binder that we have, and in the beginning, it might be kind of daunting, especially for maybe a newer foster parent or a foster parent that just hasn't had experience getting a newer child right away. So usually there's a lot of medical forms that we have to kind of go over and get some agreements signed. But we're always more than willing to sit there and go over the forms in detail as much as we need. And we understand that sometimes it's frustrating getting a lot of paperwork and having to fill it all out, and sometimes forms are changing, and maybe they're probably wondering, it's like, are they just trying to make our lives hard? And no, there's always a need for the forms that we need filled out, because what I've always found is there's always some situation that comes up where we didn't get the information we needed, and now we need an entirely new form to fill out.
Wow. That can be frustrating for a foster parent.
Yeah, it definitely can, and I think that's one of the main complaints that I get is like, there's all these forms that we have to fill out. I don't know which ones to fill out or when to fill them out, and then sometimes maybe they weren't even fully explained how to fill them out, and so I definitely understand. And there's been situations where I've run into in previous jobs where we're finding out the day of that we need to implement this entirely new form and get it started right away. So sometimes it's not just the foster parents that are having to change; it's also us having to kind of go with the flow and all the changes that happen.
Okay. So we have a question in the chat from Angela. She says, why do some kids in foster care have both an agency social worker and a county social worker, and some only have a county social worker?
So whenever a child were to get placed with Parents by Choice, and I'm just going to speak for us because I don't know how other agencies work, when they get placed with Parents by Choice, they're always going to get assigned an agency social worker through us, and they're going to get those services specifically through Parents by Choice. Now with the county, because the county has their own foster homes that they're contracted with, they only have to deal with that one specific county worker. But because they had to ask Parents by Choice specifically to be able to place that child into one of our homes, part of that agreement is that there's going to be an agency social worker as well.
And just to kind of talk a little bit about the difference between going through the county and through Parents by Choice. With Parents by Choice, you get a lot more support. How often are social workers in the home?
Something that I always say to that question is, it always depends on the need of the child, and kind of where the child is at whenever they've been placed with us. So part of regulations is whenever a new child is placed into our foster home, we have to meet with that child on a weekly basis for a period of up to 6 months. Now, maybe that child might be moved up as an ISFC, Intensive Services Foster Care Placement, and that'll still remain weekly, but sometimes, again, it's as needed for the child. For some of our older, or for some of our kids that have been placed with us for a while, and they're still an RFA placement, it usually gets changed to bi-weekly, but it also depends on the need of the child at the same time.
Okay. So you said RFA placement. Can you explain that a little bit?
So that's more of like the basic traditional foster care level. That's what a child will always come into as whenever they're placed in a foster home for the first time. And then if they needed to be changed to, again, like I said, intensive services foster care based on behavioral needs or other needs of the child, then they might get moved up to that.
Okay. So RFA kind of stands for Resource Family Approval. So Resource Family is the same thing as a foster family. It's just the new lingo that they've been using. But it's the same thing, and with Resource Family, it makes it easier for families to go through the adoption process and a few other things. Then Cynthia asks, what is your favorite part about being a social worker?
My favorite part of being a social worker is seeing the growth in the foster kids. It can be something small, like them learning how to open up and communicate with people, or seeing them do well in school, or even extracurricular activities. I've always enjoyed watching the kids that I work with play sports, and so watching them excel at something like that. It's always the little things that I get to see them grow. As the weeks and months go by.
Perfect. So Angela says, so if the county can't place a child into one of their contracted homes, they then contact agencies to find homes?
Yes, they do. And I know in our area there's a couple of agencies, and so we're just one of those agencies that they will call and see if they can place a child with us.
Perfect. So we talked about Parents by Choice providing a lot more support. Are you on call like 24/7? How does that work?
Yeah, actually, social workers are on call 24/7, as well as our in-home support workers, or in-home support counselors. We consider ourselves a 24/7 organization, and so if a foster parent is having trouble at 1 in the morning and they can't seem to de-escalate a situation in the home, they're more than welcome. And we always encourage our foster parents, please, please, please call us, because we are definitely on call and we're going to answer. Maybe we're not going to answer like within 5-10 minutes, but we will definitely be checking our phones as much as we can.
Perfect. So Cynthia says you are awesome. And then Angela asks, what educational background do social workers have to have?
It really depends. Some agencies that I've researched before in the past, they specifically only want social workers to have an MSW, or a Master's in Social Work. But I know for a large majority, even here at Parents by Choice, it's a background in social services, humanities. So we all don't have an MSW. Some of us have a master's in psychology, or my actual master's is in criminology, law, and society. So I think a more roundabout education in social services or humanities is probably the general consensus for a lot of foster care agencies.
So that's interesting that that's your background and you landed in foster care.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a long backstory to that.
Do you mind sharing the short version of that, or?
Yeah, actually, so I was working in a juvenile detention center in Kansas City, Missouri. Again, a long story about how I ended up there. But actually three of the kids that I was working with, they were all in foster care. And they all admitted that a lot of times, they will run away, or they just get in trouble. And, there's a lot of trauma that goes into that for foster kids. And one of them actually told me about their social worker and how much, they really enjoyed them, and then told me what agency they worked for. And so I sent in an application, and the rest was history. And I've been in foster care ever since.
Wow. That's an interesting workaround. Yeah. So, there's no other questions there. So Parents by Choice, they do unannounced visits. How often are those conducted, and is there a reason for the unannounced visits?
Yeah, so part of community care licensing standards is that we do an unannounced visit at least once a month. And so, we always try to be respectful, but we need to be able to balance, what we're required to do and then what the needs of the foster parents want. But we are required to at least do one unannounced visit a month.
Okay.
And then part of why, again, a lot of it just has to do with safety. We're not intentionally trying to catch foster parents, messing up. It's just if there is something that we notice and see, we want to try to correct it right away. It's nothing like we're trying to get foster parents in trouble, because again, we're asking a lot of foster parents. They're the ones that have to work with the kids 24/7, And so, we just want to make sure that at the end of the day that everyone, in the home, and then that the home itself is safe.
Okay. So Angela says, thank you for your answers. You guys rock. And so cool. So I'm assuming that was about your backstory.
Thank you.
So Parents by Choice social workers, they advocate for the children in the home. Are they advocates for the families as well? Or how is the relationship between the foster parents and the agency social worker?
Yeah, we definitely do advocate for the foster parents as well. Sometimes they might feel like their voice isn't being heard in relation to whatever is going on in the child's life, and so it's part of our job to try to balance that, what they're saying, what the child is saying, and then trying to come up with a solution for everyone. And then sometimes it even goes beyond what's going on in the home and how it relates to their case overall, and how we have to advocate to county workers even about what the issues are that the foster parents are having.
Okay. So can you explain a little bit about the difference between an in-home support worker and an agency social worker?
It's kind of funny because our foster care director Rose says that she tries to train us to not really have a difference in how we're trained, and so I definitely think that's true. The in-home support workers, though, are definitely kind of like our front line. They're like our first line of defense for us as social workers, because they're in the homes more often than we are usually. Working more one-on-one, especially with our intensive services foster care kids. And so we rely on them a lot to, just work on some of those target behaviors that might be going on. And so, like I said, it's like a lot of times there really isn't a difference between us and the in-home support. So I definitely, try to give them praise as much as I can, because they do a lot. They really do a lot.
Okay. So there's a lot of different things between, what people think social workers do versus what they actually do. What do you think about that, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions definitely about social workers. A lot of what I've been told is, we're the baby snatchers. We like to come in and just take kids from people. And for us as a foster care agency, that's definitely not true. We had nothing to do with why a child was removed from their home. We just are told, hey, we have this foster child and we would like to put them in one of your foster homes, and then we go from there. And then, there's other areas of social work. There's medical social work, or medical social workers that work in hospitals that'll advocate for patients. If anybody has ever had to apply for food stamps or Medi-Cal, you're usually working with a social worker. And so, I feel like a lot of social workers, when they're asked what do they do and they say they're a social worker, I think a lot of times people think of, oh, you're the ones that work in, child welfare, taking kids away from homes, and that's not always the case.
Okay. So a couple more questions. Angela says, are there specific things that us foster parents go to our county social worker for versus our agency social worker for?
There usually shouldn't be a lot, other than maybe in the very beginning, maybe seeing if there's, maybe medications that the child might come in with, maybe certain behaviors that the county worker is more aware of than we might be aware of. But a lot of times we ask that our foster parents come to us first with any questions or concerns, and that way we can take it directly to the county workers, instead of I've worked with county workers that are just really busy, and sometimes they'll forget, and they don't always respond, and so it's a lot easier if we just ask our foster parents to go to us first, before going to a county worker.
So that's kind of another way that you guys advocate is, you know, being that reminder to the county workers, like, hey, were you able to get this done or that done?
Yes, yes. So it really kind of just makes things a little more streamlined. And I know maybe some foster parents might not see it that way because they're just so used to going to county workers right away. But it's definitely been asked of us before in the past that whenever our foster parents need something from them, to go to us first.
Okay. So another question from Angela. An in-home support worker is an additional social worker?
No, no. In-home support workers, they're definitely workers that go to the homes to work with specific children for specific needs. They'll also go to the schools, or maybe help transport for visitation or to therapy. They definitely do a lot more one-on work with the kids than some of the agency social workers, just because of how our caseloads are structured. And so the in-home supports, like I said, they're trained to pretty much be a social worker, but their just titles are different, and just the way that they specifically work with the kids more one-on-one is a little bit different than the agency social workers.
Yeah, so if there's like a specific behavior, it's more the in-home support worker is assisting the child learning how to handle those behaviors, where you're more advocating for the needs of the child.
Yes.
Okay. Angela, you're fine. Keep asking the questions. This is why we do this. So she also asked, agency social workers are the middleman between us foster parents and the county social workers.
Yes, that's generally how we're supposed to treat that those interactions and those relationships, is that we will be the intermediary between the foster parents and the county social workers.
And I think agency social workers, they get a better relationship, a better bond with the foster parents, so it makes it easier for you guys to advocate rather than the county workers.
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay. All right, so no other questions in the chat. Let's see what else I have. So do you see anything as an agency social worker that a lot of foster parents kind of struggle with at first?
Yeah, I do. I think certain behaviors that just weren't expected. I think some foster parents might feel that they were maybe blindsided, or they just weren't fully prepared. And so we always try to ask those foster parents to just keep an open mind, um, and expect the unexpected, because a lot of times we don't know all the details. Maybe it's a totally brand new child into the foster care system, and so the county social worker might not know everything. Maybe they couldn't get all of the relevant information, and so we're learning things for the first time. And so we just definitely try to ask our foster parents to be patient, because we're learning new things on the go as well. And so we always want to try to give things time, and then we will definitely work as hard and as fast as we can to start addressing those behaviors. But we always ask to just make sure to give us enough time to be able to do that.
Okay. So Angela says, thank you. I've learned a lot today. Trying to think what else I could ask since I have you. What are some qualities that you see in foster parents that make a good foster parent?
A foster parent that has the patience and the willingness to learn, I think are two really important qualities, that I think just really make it easier to be a foster parent. and I think sometimes it's always hard to learn those, but if you're willing to try, it'll go a long way. Because again, all of our kids have experienced some form of trauma. And so if you have that patience to just be willing to listen and to try to work with with our kids, um, it'll just make a world of difference for for every foster kid that they'll come across.
Um, you have anything you want to add before we close it, or?
No, I don't really think I have anything else. Well, I guess we're always looking for new foster parents, and so if there is any interest out there, definitely reach out to us.
So you guys can go to our website, www.parentsbychoice.net/programs/foster care. And I believe there's a button on there that says become a foster parent or a resource parent. Again, it's the same thing, it's just different lingo. So you just click on that button and you can get started on the process. A lot of it is all online, so it makes it easier for you guys to get everything completed during this COVID-19 situation. And we will be talking more about the process to become a foster parent or a resource parent with our approval specialist. I can't think of what her actual title is right now, but she'll be joining me on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So you guys can tune in there to learn more on the process to become a resource parent. So thank you, Eddie, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciated learning a little bit more about you too, so this is awesome. All right, so I'll see you guys again Tuesday at 3 o'clock. So bye.